Have you ever woken up in a house so quiet you could hear the clock ticking? No footsteps, no good morning. Just you, a cup of coffee, and the thoughts you used to avoid. They say silence is peaceful, but after she's gone, you realize silence can also be the echo of everything that was never told. Today I'm going to tell you the truth about those mornings, and why they change a man forever. Today I'm going to tell you the truth about those mornings, the ones that strip a man down to who he is and change him forever. I've coached hundreds of men over 50, and many of them have told me the same thing. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of the mornings after she's gone. If you've lived through that, you know this isn't just your story. It's the story of countless men who had to learn how to start a day without someone by their side. Silence that feels heavier than an argument. When you were still together, the sound of conversation, even the arguments meant there was still a connection. Fighting meant you still cared. Silence meant the distance was growing. But when she's gone, the silence changes. It's not just quiet. It's a presence in the room, a weight you can feel in your chest. You start hearing things you never noticed before. The low hum of the fridge steady and cold. The wind sneaking through the cracks in the window, whispering like a secret no one wants to tell. The soft click of the coffee maker finishing a brew, a sound that used to be buried under the chatter of a shared morning. And your heartbeat. Slow, heavy, louder than you remember. At first, the silence feels like a void you can't stand. You turn on the television not because you want to watch anything, but because you need to hear another human voice. You play music not to enjoy it, but to drown out the thoughts pressing in from all sides. You scroll your phone, falling into an endless stream of meaningless videos, anything to avoid looking at that empty chair across the breakfast table. It's not just the absence of her voice. It's the absence of the little things you didn't know you noticed. The sound of her moving in the kitchen, the way she hummed without realizing it, the faint shuffle of her slippers down the hallway. And without those sounds, the quiet doesn't feel like peace. It feels like proof that life has changed, in a way you can't undo. But one day, when the noise you've been using to cover it up finally fades, you realize something. Noise doesn't always mean connection, and silence doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes silence is a mirror. It shows you not just the life you had, but the man you are now. And the truth it reflects can be harder to face than any argument you've ever had, because argument earned. But this kind of silence stays, and the only way to live with it is to learn from it. Mornings become a mirror for your life. When there's no one pushing you, no schedule revolving around someone else, mornings stop being just the start of a day. They become a mirror, and the reflection can be hard to look at. You wake up, pour your coffee, sit down, and suddenly, there's nowhere to hide. The quiet doesn't just surround you, it turns toward you. It shows you what's been left behind. You start to notice the small, unfinished pieces of yourself. The book you left on page 87, 3 years ago. The guitar in the corner, strings loose, wood dry, covered in dust, a reminder of songs you never learned to play. The sketchpad with only one page filled, from the night you told yourself you'd get back into it. And it's not just hobbies. You see the bigger things you've abandoned. Dreams you swore you'd chase when life slowed down. Plans you shelved because someone else's needs came first. Parts of your personality you muted to keep the peace. The truth is, many men realize in these quiet mornings that they've spent half their lives living for everyone but themselves. And that realization hits hard. It's like opening an old attic box, expecting to find treasures only to see things warped, broken, or forgotten. And you have to face the question, when did I stop taking care of myself? That quiet isn't just her absence. It's the presence of the real you, the man who's been buried under obligations, under compromise, under years of maybe later. The reflection isn't always flattering. Sometimes you see strength, resilience you didn't know you had. Other times, you see neglect. Not the kind you'd allow for anyone else, but somehow the kind you've allowed for yourself. And in that moment you understand, these mornings are not just empty spaces in the calendar. They are invitations, opportunities to pick up the pieces you've left behind, or to keep walking past them. Silence doesn't decide which man you become. It just shows you who you are before the day begins. When silence becomes strength, at first, you fight it. You don't just sit with the silence. You try to outrun it. You fill your calendar with unnecessary errands. You leave the television on in the background, even when you're not watching. You scroll through your phone not because you're curious, but because you're avoiding the weight of stillness. You text old friends half hoping someone will invite you out. You post something online not because you have anything to say, but to see if anyone notices you're still here. You even agree to meet for drinks with people you barely connect with because being out feels safer than being alone with your own thoughts. But eventually, you get tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from pretending. And one morning, without planning it, you stop. You make your coffee a little slower, noticing the sound of the water dripping through the filter. You sit by the window a little longer, watching the sunlight crawl across the floorboards. You don't rush to check your phone. You don't search for noise to drown out the quiet. And in that stillness, something shifts. You realize you don't have to run anymore. You can stay. You can sit with your own thoughts, and they won't break you. That's when silence stops being the enemy and starts becoming a teacher. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to listen not to the world, not to other people's demands, but to yourself. You begin to see that not every absence is a loss. Not everyone who leaves your life has taken something from you. Sometimes they've simply left behind space, the kind of space you need to grow into the man you were supposed to be. This is where strength is born. Not in the noise, not in the applause or the validation from others, but in the quiet, where you face yourself without flinching. And when you've stood in that silence long enough, you realize it's no longer a void. It's a foundation, something solid, something you can build on, and never let anyone take away again. New habits born from quiet mornings. When you're no longer rushing to keep up with someone else's rhythm, mornings start to feel different. They stop being a blur. They become intentional. And slowly, without you even noticing, they start to shape new habits. You wake up earlier not because of an alarm, but because you want to. You want to catch that first soft light coming through the curtains. You want to hear the world before it gets noisy. You pour your coffee, and for once, you don't rush through it. You notice the warmth of the mug in your hands, the smell of roasted beans in the air, the way steam curls and disappears into nothing. You start writing a few lines in a journal, not to impress anyone, not to post online, just to capture a thought before it fades, or a feeling you can't quite explain out loud. You stretch, not because you're training for anything, not because someone told you to, but because it feels good to move, to remind your body it's still alive, still capable. You make yourself breakfast, simple, but made with your own hands. Eggs in a pan. Toast just the way you like it. No compromises. No, what do you want for breakfast? Negotiations. And somewhere in those small acts, you realize something. You're not doing them to fill time. You're doing them to fill yourself. Every habit becomes a quiet declaration. I matter enough to take care of me. You don't have to rush to prove your worth. You can move slowly and still be strong. And once you discover that, you start protecting it. You stop saying yes to every early meeting. You stop letting your phone dictate the first hour of your day. You guard that morning space the way a man guards his most valuable possession. Because it's not just a routine. It's a reset, a reminder that even after loss, there's life to be lived, and it can start before the rest of the world wakes up. How you see people changes. When you're caught in the noise of daily life, it's easy to miss the little things. The subtle looks, the pauses in conversation, the way someone's presence feels different from their words. But when life slows, when the mornings are quiet, you start to notice. You notice who reaches out without needing something. You notice who disappears the moment you stop being the one to call first. You notice who only checks in when they have a favor to ask. And it's not just about absence, it's about intention. You start to see the difference between someone being busy and someone keeping you at arm's length. At first, this awareness feels heavy, almost like another kind of loss, because you realize some of the relationships you valued were built on habits, not genuine care. Some people liked you for what you gave them, your time, your attention, your help, not for who you were when you had nothing to offer. But here's the thing. You stop taking it personally. You stop chasing. You start letting the ones who drift. It's not anger, it's clarity. You understand now that peace doesn't come from having a lot of people around you. It comes from having the right people around you, and the quiet gives you the space to sort them out. Like clearing out a cluttered room, you see what's worth keeping, and what's been taking up space without adding value. There's freedom in that. The freedom to invest in the few who matter, and release the ones who don't. The freedom to answer calls because you want to, not because you feel you have to. The freedom to build connections based on mutual respect, not convenience. You stop fearing the smaller circle, because a smaller circle made of people who truly see you feels bigger than a crowd of half-interested faces. And once you've felt that difference, you'll never settle for anything less again. When you're no longer afraid to be alone, there's a fear many men won't admit, not to their friends, not to their family, sometimes not even to themselves. The fear of getting older and being alone. It's a fear that sneaks in during the quiet moments. The what-if questions. What if no one is there when I get sick? What if the house stays empty forever? What if this is it the rest of my life? At first, those thoughts hit hard. They press on your chest in the early hours of the morning. They make you second-guess every choice that led you here. And they tempt you to reach for anyone just to fill the space. But here's what happens after enough quiet mornings, after enough cups of coffee sipped alone, after enough sunrises witnessed without rushing out the door. The fear starts to fade, because you realize being alone isn't the scary part. Losing yourself is. When you've been through heartbreak, through loss, through the unraveling of a life you thought was secure, you start to see that loneliness isn't the enemy you thought it was. You can live with empty rooms. You can live with nights where no one calls. What you can't live with, not anymore, is giving away your peace just to avoid those moments. You stop chasing the idea of someone, anyone, to make you feel whole. You understand that wholeness is your job. It's built in the choices you make for yourself. It's in the boundaries you protect. It's in the mornings where you wake up and know you're not waiting on anyone to start your day. And here's the surprising part. When you no longer fear being alone, you become far more selective about who you let in. You don't need constant company. You want meaningful company. If they can't bring depth, honesty, and peace into your life, you're perfectly fine keeping the silence you worked so hard to reclaim. It's not bitterness. It's not giving up on love. It's knowing that the man you are now will never trade his self-respect for the illusion of connection again. When stillness becomes a boundary, there comes a point when the quiet is no longer something you're getting used to. It becomes something you protect. Like a man who's rebuilt his home after a storm, you don't let just anyone walk in and rearrange the furniture. You notice it in the little choices. You don't rush to reply to every message because you know not every message deserves your immediate attention. You let the phone ring sometimes, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You say no to invitations that pull you into rooms you no longer belong in. You don't fake the smile anymore. You don't force the small talk just to make other people comfortable. Because you've learned comfort that costs your peace is too expensive. The stillness you have now isn't emptiness, it's clarity. And clarity acts like a filter. It shows you what fits in your life and what needs to stay outside the door. There will be people who don't understand this version of you. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant. But the truth is you've simply drawn a line between what drains you and what sustains you. And once you've lived on the sustaining side, you can't go back. You can't unlearn the difference between noise and music. You can't forget how it feels to wake up without dread in your chest. Some people will try to pull you back into the chaos. They'll test your boundaries. They'll push to see if you still have the old reflex, the one that made you say yes when you should have said no. But now, you pause. You think. You ask yourself, will this add to my life, or will it take from it? And if the answer is take, you let it go without guilt. Because you finally understand stillness isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of choice. And that choice is yours alone to protect. The man who wakes up with himself. You still believe in love. You still believe in connection. But you'll never lose yourself for it again. There was a time when you shaped your days around someone else's needs. When you measured your worth by how much you gave, and how little you asked for in return. That man is gone. Not because he was weak, but because he learned. He learned that giving without boundaries is not love. It's self-erasure. He learned that losing yourself in someone else doesn't guarantee they'll stay. It just guarantees that if they leave, you have nothing left. Now, when you wake up in the morning, you don't reach for your phone first. You don't check to see who needs you before you've even had your coffee. You start with you. You breathe. You think about what matters today to you. You take your time. And in that space, you feel something you never used to feel. Wholeness. If she comes into your life, great. If not, you're still whole. Because your life isn't a waiting room anymore. You're not sitting there, hoping someone will walk in and make it feel complete. You've become the kind of man you want to wake up with every morning. Not perfect, not flawless, but solid, present, grounded in who he is and what he stands for. And that is the most important relationship you'll ever have. Because when you can look in the mirror in the quiet of the morning and know you respect the man looking back at you, you've already won. Love, if it comes, will be a choice, not a lifeline. And you'll be ready to give, not from a place of emptiness, but from overflow. The mornings after she's gone may have started as a wound, but they've become a foundation. And now every sunrise is not a reminder of what you lost. It's a reminder of what you've built. The mornings after she's gone, they can break you, or they can build you. They can be the weakest moments of your life, or the strongest. At first they hurt. They remind you of what's missing. They make you want to reach for anything, anyone to make the silence go away. But if you stay with them, if you face them, something changes. You start to see that the quiet isn't your enemy. It's your opportunity. Because in that stillness, you get to choose. You get to decide what your life will be from this moment forward. You get to rebuild not the way it was, but the way it should have been all along. And here's the truth. No one's coming to hand you your peace. No one's going to walk in and suddenly make you whole. That work, that gift, belongs to you. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up in that same quiet, don't rush to fill it. Don't reach for noise. Sit with it. Breathe in it. Let it remind you that you've survived everything you thought you couldn't. Because if you can face the silence, if you can stand in it without fear, there's nothing in this world that can shake you. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll look around in that quiet and realize it's no longer the echo of what's gone. It's the sound of the life you chose and the man you've become.